Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a world of ice, complex social structures, and absolutely radical imagination. We are exploring Ursula K. Le Guin's groundbreaking 1969 science fiction novel, The Left Hand of Darkness. But here is the thing. We aren't going to look at this book as some sort of crystal ball trying to predict the distant future. Instead, we're going to explore its central premise exactly as the author intended, as a really complex, meticulously crafted thought experiment about our present reality.
Right off the bat, Le Guin actually sets the record straight herself. She famously stated in her 1976 introduction to the novel that a novelist's business is lying. Her goal was never to be a futurologist telling us what the 21st century or the year 4870 would practically look like. Instead, she uses what she calls a tissue of lies, inventing planets, people, and events that never existed to describe reality and human psychology right now, today. The fiction is just the vehicle for the truth.
Okay, let's jump right into part one, the thought experiment. To truly understand what Le Guin is doing here, we have to look at how she uses the genre itself. Think of this novel as a controlled laboratory environment where a few fundamental rules of human existence have just been completely changed. A lot of science fiction uses predictive extrapolation, taking a current trend and pushing it to a bleak, extreme future, which, as Le Guin points out, usually ends up being pretty depressing. Instead, she uses the genre as a descriptive metaphor. She alters major variables, specifically biological gender and extreme climate environments, and then steps back to see how society naturally reacts and evolves under those brand new conditions.
Moving on to part two, a world without gender.
So, to really grasp the society, you've got to understand their unique biology, because it completely redefines their culture, their politics, and their relationships. The people of Gethen are ambisexual. For 24 days out of the lunar cycle, they're basically sexually latent androgynous. It's only during a brief period called Kemer that they adopt active sexual attributes, becoming either male or female, depending on the context of their relationships at that moment. This means there is no fixed gender. Every single individual on the planet shares both the burden and the privilege of bearing and raising children. Because of this, Le Guin explores a society where sexual tension just isn't a continuous driving factor, and remarkably, a society that has no concept of war.
Now, you might be wondering, when this book dropped in 1969, it immediately sparked a massive feminist debate. It was praised as a landmark piece of feminist science fiction for sure, but a really crucial question came up. Did Le Guin successfully remove gender constraints, or did she subtly reinforce them without even realizing it?
What's super fascinating here is how this conversation evolved over the decades. Back in 1969, critics objectively debated her choice to use masculine he/him pronouns as the default for these androgynous characters. They also pointed out that heterosexuality was still portrayed as the absolute norm during that camera period. But the really interesting part? Le Guin actually listened. In a 1987 retrospective essay, she acknowledged those exact critiques. She admitted that relying on he/him unintentionally excluded women from the discourse and kind of hid the female aspects of the Gethenians, and she expressed regret over portraying heterosexuality as the default.
Which brings us to part three, winter and ecofeminism.
This whole philosophy builds directly into the physical world of Gethen itself. The planet is literally nicknamed Winter because it's encased in a brutal, ongoing ice age. But this environment isn't just a cool backdrop. It acts as a deep environmental critique through the lens of ecofeminism. Academic research by Bethany Pineda highlights how the novel functions beautifully as an ecofeminist text. Essentially, ecofeminism points out that hierarchical cultures that tend to marginalize or other different groups of people are the exact same cultures that attempt to oppress and dominate their natural environment. So how the characters treat the ice and the cold directly mirrors how they treat each other.
We see this perfectly in the protagonist, Genli A. He's a human envoy from Earth, sent to invite Gethen to an intergalactic alliance. Now, he starts out with this mindset of oppositional dualism. Coming from Earth, he views nature as a cruel enemy that just has to be fought, dominated, and heated away. But to succeed, he has to completely flip the script and learn inclusive duality. This is a mindset where differences, whether that's the harsh weather or the ambisexual nature of the Gethenians, are embraced as complementary and necessary, rather than just hierarchical things to be conquered.
And we actually watch this psychological shift happen chronologically during a wildly brutal 80-day trek across the Gobrin ice. Genli I and a disgraced Gethenian politician named Estraven are forced out onto the ice after escaping a harsh labor camp. This incredible journey of survival is what ultimately strips away Genli's Terran prejudices.
Let's trace how this happens. First off, they break out of the fences and mind-altering drugs of Polifon Farm, which is basically human domination at its absolute worst.
Next, they pass these erupting twin volcanoes, Drumner and Drimagole, which actively symbolize the massive political upheaval happening all over the planet. Then, they have to traverse the Unshadow, this exhausting, blindingly white weather phenomenon where there are literally zero shadows, before finally making it back to the Society of Karhide.
All right, part 4, shadows and communication.
Look, surviving that trek across the ice was completely impossible through just sheer physical endurance. Genli had to fundamentally change how he connected with Estraven. Before the ice, Genli was completely clueless about Gethenian communication, specifically this concept called Shifgrithor. It's an intricate, mostly untranslatable set of unspoken social rules, prestige, and face-saving courtesy. Genli's rigid, earth-masculine mannerisms and his total ignorance of Shifgrithor created massive misunderstandings. He kept thinking Estraven was being sketchy or evasive, when in reality, Estraven was just trying to help him within the strict bounds of Gethenian courtesy.
And this communication barrier between the two of them, it is brilliantly mirrored in Gethen's dominant religions. In the nation of Karhide, you have the Handara, which embraces darkness, balance, and this informal state of untrance. On the flip side, in the rival nation of Orgarain, you have the Yomish cult, a strict, monotheistic religion that worships absolute light and completely rejects the dark.
Which brings us to the core Taoist philosophy running through the entire novel. It's perfectly summarized by this quote: "Light is the left hand of darkness, and darkness the right hand of light." Remember that blinding white weather of the Unshadow? Out there on the ice, Genli literally realizes that pure daylight isn't enough. You actually need shadows just to see the terrain and walk. It's a massive lightbulb moment. It teaches him that he can't just accept the light or human-like parts of Estraven. He has to embrace the dual nature of his companion to truly connect.
Finally, Part 5, The Legacy of Gethen. By the time they make it off the ice, Genli has achieved a radical acceptance of both the extreme cold and Estraven's ambisexuality. At the start, he thought he was sent to Gethen to change their world, but he realizes the truth. He was sent alone so that he could be changed by it. But to cement the intergalactic alliance, a really heavy price is paid. Estraven sacrifices himself at the border. Because of their deep empathetic connection, Genli realizes that an arch cannot stand without a keystone set in a blood bond. Estraven's tragic sacrifice becomes the literal mortar that secures Gethen's future.
The impact of this story has been absolutely monumental. It swept the 1970 Hugo and Nebula Awards and totally challenged traditional male-centric science fiction by using a postmodern mix of ethnological reports, myths, and dual narrators. Its rich world-building continues to inspire stage plays, incredible puppet adaptations, and robust scholarly debate about ecology and gender to this day.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought, directly inspired by Le Guin's grand experiment. If we accept that science fiction isn't about predicting the future, what does this freezing, androgynous, alien world expose about our current reality? What does this tissue of lies reveal about how quickly we other people who are different from us and how we attempt to dominate the very planet we live on? It is a question that is just as vital today as it was in 1969. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey across the ice.